So good.
Yep, it's in progress.
More and more people are asking for recordings. This is an interesting time of the year because we're now approaching RFA season, which is we're expecting to come out in June. We'll talk about that later. But it's time to start thinking about the grant, the 24 FY24 grant, but at the same time talk about what we can do in our programs to improve the basic aspects of it. So we're going to talk about two things kind of simultaneously. One is about what you need to do now to start preparing for this grant. But at the same time, we want to talk about these basic components, critical issues, we call them, of developing your program and how you could make it better. So we're going to be doing kind of two things at once, preparing people who may be thinking of a grant this year or next year for a re-up or an additional grant. And then at the same time, talking about the traditional responsibilities of job training programs. So we start these off, of course, with news from Washington, what's new, what's happening, and we're going to introduce ourselves after that. So Steve, do you want to get started?
Sure, Mike, I'll be happy to. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're from. I think most people on here look like it's probably afternoon, but maybe some of you are on the West Coast. Okay, the first thing I wanted to talk about was the 2023 all grantee meeting that's going to be happening in May. And you've probably, if you're on the PLC list, you probably got an email this morning, a reminder to sign up if you haven't. Some of the topics that we're going to be covering include grants management, grantee partnerships, challenges and minefields for grantees. We're going to talk about the EJ tool, ACRES is going to give an update. We're also going to look at rural grantee issues, tips and strategies for recruiting, screening, assessing populations, and working with diverse populations and many other topics. Those are some of the highlights. Reserve your room now. The hotel reservation cutoff for the block of rooms that we have is May 1st. So while that seems like a long way off, it's just about a month out. And unfortunately, we will not be able to cover the cost of lodging outside of that block of rooms. So if you wait and procrastinate till the very end, you may be having to register at the hotel or a different hotel. So I want to encourage you to do that if you haven't already. Basically, again, for the conference, it's a two-step process. You go on our Google Forms link to register, and then we have the phone numbers to the hotel where you can make reservations. So that's coming up, believe it or not, sooner than you think. So with that cutoff in mind, if you haven't registered and reserved a room yet, we would encourage you to do so as soon as possible. Also, Brownfield's 2023, the national conference, is going to be August 8th through 11th in Detroit. We still don't have any information yet as to what the host hotel is going to be, where that's going to be located, and we're about 5 months out. So I think we're going to be getting that information probably soon. The Phoenix Award nominations are still open. It's basically the premier awards program for Brownfield's redevelopment, and gives them a chance to recognize people around the country that make, successful brownfields redevelopment happen. So you can still, send in your nominations, and you can even nominate yourself, actually. And the link will be in the notes. So keep that in mind. And then also at Brownfield's 2023, you have an opportunity to either exhibit, get an exhibit booth yourself, or come in with us. We're already gonna have a booth. In fact, we already have it. So if you have materials you'd like to showcase or share, please let us know, or please send them to us ahead of time, and we'll be sure and take them and talk about your program if you can't make it. Also, Region 3 is quarterly, doing some quarterly open discussions on Zoom. They're beginning this week. And I think it's Friday, March 30th at 2:30. We're going to be providing information about this going forward because they're going to make this an ongoing thing where they talk about challenges and provide input on topics that impact, all of the communities within Region 3. So this first session, which is on Friday, we'll begin with an introduction and extension of the 2022 open house. So if you are in Region 3, keep that in mind. There's also a contact person, and I'm going to put that in the chat box when I get done here, so you have that, because again, this is Friday, and if you want some information on it, I'll put that email in the link for you. And lastly, a couple of questions have come in from participants. The first one was, how long will I have to respond to the EPA request for application after it is posted? The response is basically applicants will only have 60 days to write and submit their applications, which obviously is not enough time to properly establish partnerships and get all of the required work done ahead of time. So we strongly suggest that you begin preparation immediately to ensure, give you a higher chance of success instead of trying to pack it all in at the very end. Another question, will the FY24 request for applications be the same as FY23 request for applications? And the response, basically, FY24 request for applications will not be available until posted on grants.gov. Indications are that the FY24 competition will be similar to FY23's. And while we expect minor changes, using the available FY23 guidance materials would be a good strategy in preparing for the grant. And links to those materials will be discussed later in this this session today, and also be included in the notes that are sent out. Last question was, how do I submit a brownfields job training grant application? And basically the response is all EPA grant applications are submitted online. Organizations must register in 2 government systems to apply for EPA grants. The first is called SAM, or the System for Award Management. SAM.gov registers organizations that conduct business with the US government. And then there's grants.gov, which is the official system for managing all federal applications. So to apply through grants.gov, organizations must have a unique entity identifier and then have an active System for Award Management, SAM, account and be registered in grants.gov. So you also need to make sure you designate your organization's authorized organization representative. So there's more information about how to register on links that we will provide in the notes that'll be sent out to you after this meeting.
Steve,
So,
before we
yeah.
go too further, now that people have come into the meeting, maybe we could introduce ourselves when you're finished.
Sure, I'm done. I was just going to turn it back.
Okay. Okay. Why don't and the reason we do this, and some of us already know each other, but we got the all grantee meeting coming up, and we like to find out, put a face to a name of an organization and what they do. So because we're able to do this, we like to do that. So why don't we go around the clock? And Steve, you've already introduced yourself. My name is Mike Senu. I'm facilitator of the HMTRI Professional Development Program. Nolan?
I'm Nolan Curtis. I work with Steve and Mike with HMTRI, and hopefully for all of you. And I do want to take one moment to point something out. This is our PLC number 290. So there have been 290 of these PLC calls in various iterations. It's phone calls, it's Zoom calls, it's carrier pigeon messages. And the person who's been at all of them is Mike Senu. So it's pretty amazing that, and I want to give him his propers, and he's properly embarrassed, I know, but it's a team effort, but Mike has been the backbone of this for 290 consecutive PLC calls. So We know that you are dedicated to your programs and helping people, but I just want to shout out my partner, Mike, as being one of those people who is so dedicated. And so if you give him a golf clap. Anyway, I'm Nolan Curtis and I'm a consultant with HMTRI.
Well, thanks for the plug. I got a pen, an official HMTRI pen for that work. I appreciate it. So, David.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is David Cantu. I'm with the Citizen of Rosario. I sit on City Council, but I also work with the Rio Grande Council of Governments as a regional group to try to get more programs and grants funded through the whole region of West Texas.
Great. Hopefully a new applicant. Yes,
we were looking at an application for this year, but some changes were made in our partnerships. So we're going to have to refocus for.
Okay. Well, we'll be talking about that.
Yeah.
Abby.
Hi, everyone. I'm Abby Walensky. I'm with the Employment Institute at Auberly. We're located just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in McKeesport, and we are a 4-time job training and brownfields job training grantee.
One of our stars. Rachel.
Hi, good afternoon, Mike and Stephen. I don't see Rita on here yet, but we just completed our first OSHA class.
Congratulations.
So we're on to our first HAZWOPER on April 6th and then doing OSHA 30 on the week of the 17th. So we're excited to.
Well, you know what that means. We're going to have to get you in as a guest speaker so you could tell us all the problems you had.
Yeah, that's what I told my partner. I was like, if you want to present, we can now or we can wait. But either way, I think we're ready.
I'll tell you, it's been fun watching you develop your program. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cindy.
Hi, I'm Cindy Manning. I'm with Coalfield Development Corporation in Southern West Virginia. And we are a job training grantee at the moment.
Congratulations. They're returning grantee. They had several and then they had a respite and then they're back. So Diana.
Hello, everyone. I'm Diana Napier with the Workplace in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and we're the Workforce Development Board for the region here.
Great.
Southwest Connecticut.
Okay. Hey, Karen.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Karen Goldman. I'm the Director of Workforce Development here in Southwest Detroit. And so we have a grant here to provide job training.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Turgeon.
Thank you. Jeff Turgeon. I'm with the Mass Hire Central Region Workforce Board. So we're in New England's second largest city of Worcester. And so we're about 45 minutes west of Boston, right in the heart of the Commonwealth here in Massachusetts. And we have a training grant as well. We have our first of 3 cohorts starting next week. We have one cohort going in April, then another in May and another in June, which aligns with employer hiring for the summer and the warmer weather here in New England. And we're excited that our first cohort is full. So knock on wood, they all show up. I'm sure you know how that goes. And then we've been getting a fairly strong response overall for the other 2 cohorts. So we're excited to go as well.
Fantastic. Mac, thank you for your presentation last time.
Not a problem. My name is Mac Alabed. I am the Senior Manager of Workforce here at Southwest Economic Solutions in Detroit. We are a current grantee. Thanks.
Okay. Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. Jonathan Phillips, the Executive Director of Groundwork Elizabeth. We've got a green workforce initiative for our youth, and we're looking forward to the opportunities that this grant could present.
Great. Kimberly.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Kelly. I work with the Sustainable Workplace Alliance. We are a new grantee with you guys, but we've had this grant through the National Institute of Health. So we're familiar with it, but excited to get to work with this one.
Great. Amy, all the way from Alaska.
Hi, my name is Amy Penny. I am the Deputy Director of the Alaska Forum, and we are a longtime grant holder. And we do a lot of environmental training in rural Alaska and villages and landfill training and brownfields work and whatnot. So
Great. Thank you. Employment Skills Center. Well, we'll see. Someone from Employment Skills Center, if you get this message, come on whenever. Mr. Miller.
Mark Miller with Moody and Associates. I'm up in northwestern Pennsylvania. We do a lot of EPA grant work with the Oil Region Alliance, and they asked me to participate in the call to learn out a little bit more about what's going on at this time.
Fantastic. Jessica.
Hi, this is Jessica from Pasto, Puerto Rico, and we provide job trainings in Puerto Rico in different areas.
Great. And Anna.
Oh, hi, I'm Anna Leisher. I'm with Stromberg, Garrigan and Associates. We're a planning consulting firm out of Pittsburgh, and we're managing Beaver County's Brownfield Assessment Grant. And we have a seed project that looks like it might be a good candidate for potential Brownfield training grants. So I just wanted to learn more about the program.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Talabar, is that Karen? Is that Talabar? Talbar?
Hello, it's Kathleen and it's Tall Bear.
I'm sorry.
I'm with the Cheyenne Arapaho Tribes Tribal Employment Rights Ordinance, and I work with Rachel on the EPA trainings, Brownsville training.
Great. Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie Cameron with Youth Build Louisville. We are a hopeful grantee.
Very good. Very good. Well, we hope you'll learn something in these PLCs in the coming months. Jessica Hartle. Okay, Jessica.
Yes.
Jessica, we got Jessica Guzman. This is Jessica Hartle.
Hi, sorry, it took me a minute to unmute.
It's okay.
Yes, I am with the Heartland Conservation Alliance, and we are a grant holder, and I actually just started last week, so I'm getting my footing. I'm the Conservation Program Manager, and so I'll be helping to manage the grant that we have, and also, potentially applying for future grants as well.
Great, great. And someone that got called in, there was a phone call, 717-243-6040. If you could hear this or have audio, please speak up. And the Employment Skills Center said the same thing. They had audio issues. So, but that's okay. What we will try to do is introduce ourselves to see who's who. And we have some new callers that have never been on a call before, I'll put my email in the chat. If you want to receive post-session notes, which will come out Monday or Tuesday of next week, just put your, just send me your contact information. It's msenu@gmail.com, msenu@gmail.com. And that's for anything you want to do. If you have some suggestions, ideas, or ask a question, just send that in. Okay, somehow not someone is on from Employment Skills. Anyone? Okay. Did I miss anyone? Yes.
Mike, before you continue, Jeff had a question. I see it in the chat box.
Hi, Jeff.
Like the expected grant release date.
Okay, here's the story, and we're going to be, and Nolan's going to be talking about it, and I'll be talking about it. This is the way EPA works. They have their technical staff, and nobody's on the call this week from the technical staff, but they have they're writing all the information about how to evaluate the grant and what it's about, and they'll be the one evaluating it, assembling a team. They send out their proposed RFA to all the regional coordinators, and as I understand, that has been sent out to everybody. The regional coordinators have a chance to put their 2 cents into it, how we may want to change the grant this year. At this point, indications are that it's going to be the same as last year's, which we'll be getting into later into the weeds and in generalities. Then it goes back to the project officer, and then it's submitted to the grants office. Now, this is all secret stuff. There's no visibility for anyone, and nobody gets to see the outside of EPA, really gets to see the applications until it's released on grants.gov. In fact, the EPA people don't even know the exact date it's going to be released, because it goes to the grants.gov office, grants management, and they'll release it when they feel they're ready to release it. So nobody really gets to see it until it's released. And of course, Nolan will be talking about that, what happens at that point. But that's when the ball starts rolling. And that's why we're starting to talk today and moving forward about the grants, and also about the critical issues that are involved in doing a successful grant program. So in other words, we're going to be exchanging ideas on what makes a good choosing your target community, assessment, planning, partnerships, how you could develop partnerships. And we're going to be doing the overall general things so that when that grant comes out, which nobody knows what it's going to exactly look like, you'll be able to write the grant in the time allotted. If you don't do the pre-work, it's going to be very difficult to do the grant, and we'll explain that later, because it takes a long time to develop partnerships, get your alliances together, change your curriculum if necessary, maybe revise your recruitment approaches. So we'll be talking about that in the future. But as far as your answer, to give a short answer, is no, nobody knows. And it's unless someone leaks it for some reason, but we'll certainly keep you informed the day it comes out. And but before then, between now and we think it'll be in June, might be later in June, that's the approximate month when we feel it'll be out, sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later. We will let you know exactly, but you'll be prepared to write that grant by the time it comes out. That's what we're here for right now.
In fact, you can probably write about 2/3 of the grant before the RFA is even issued, because as we'll explain, the sections or what they want discussed is usually similar.
Steve, anything else in the chat that we need to respond to before we move on?
I think that's it.
Okay, I'll put my address for those of you who don't have it, for getting the notes, getting all the invites, 2 invites a week, and the week before the meeting. They're basically every other week that we'll be doing these. Okay, I'd like to turn it over to Nolan, unless there's any other questions in general. We'll be addressing a lot of these things today regarding the pivot to the RFA and the critical issues in improving your grant that you have. Nolan, do you want to take over?
Sure. Hi. I guess the first thing is a tentative timeline for the FY24 grant applicants. And the timeline for each of the grantee will depend on the actual award date and when the applicants are authorized to spend funds. So for FY24 grant cycle, the first 4 years of that grant will focus on program development, training, delivery, and placement, tracking, and a final 5th year, has been added for additional training, placement, tracking, and program sustainability. And milestones for the FY24 grant cycle may change, but they might look like the schedule that we're about to go over. And again, this will be in the notes. For winter, spring of 2023, begin your program planning, stakeholder and partnership development. For spring, summer, request for applications, estimated posting in June on grants.gov. So again, we know it's in process, but things are moving at the speed of government. So you can take that however you want to. But we feel like they're really up to speed, and in fact, maybe even a little bit ahead of where they have been in the past. But we're looking at probably a June release, but we don't know. So as Mike said earlier, applicants have 60 days to write and submit applications. New grantees should begin developing their proposals several months in advance. And so again, there's a few items that we'll identify that are what we call long poles in the tent that you'll need more than 60 days to establish if you haven't already done that. Application deadline submitted to the grants.gov will be, we presume, in August. And that'll lead us into the fall and winter. The applications not passing threshold criteria are notified within 15 days of the grant closure. So if you submit a grant and they're not going to look at it further, they'll let you know in pretty short order, in about 2 weeks. And then evaluation criteria reviews continue. And typically in the fall and winter, if it follows the pattern from before, that's when they'll do that. And then in early 2024, the applicants will be recommended for funding first quarter of 2024. The grant packages are sent to successful applicants. Award letters and acceptance by selected applicants then have to be returned to EPA. So if you're selected, it doesn't mean you automatically get it. It means you have to go back with your institution and figure out, can we live with all this? And then work those final details with EPA. In the spring and summer, the work plans and grant administration is completed prior to the final award, and that's usually 60 to 90 days after you submitted the grant package. So some of you who just recently got the grants know that you got that turned around pretty quickly. Some of you were waiting a little bit, on kind of pins and needles. And the funds are available for training are released before September 31st in 2024. So, they will be in time for that fiscal year. From 2024 to 2029, the training cohorts continue with the program refinements, partnership development, and placement improvements based on experience. So, continuous improvement, you'll learn as you go. Even if you've done this many times before, that things change. And so you continue with that development. The training and placement process with ACRES reporting quarterly. And so another plug for the conference, we will have someone there explaining that ACRES reporting system. And that's very critical to your programs, being able to report it to EPA. Consideration regarding program expansion, improvement, and sustainability continue. Placement, funding development, and program continuation is considered as the completion date of the grant approaches. And then the final placement, tracking program continuation plans, and grant wrap up through 2029. So again, we're anticipating a 5-year grant cycle, which is the same as what they just put out this past year. And again, it's a little bit longer commitment. Overall, there's been a little bit of increase in funding, but on a per year basis, not really. It's the same amount of money for a little bit longer work. So what can you expect when the FY24 Brownfield Job Training RFA is issued? So with the increase in funding available to the EPA Brownfields program under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is BIL, EPA's Brownfields Job Training Grant Program has dramatically increased funding during FY23 and 24 funding cycles. For grantees funding prior to last year's 23 funding, the following changes were made. So beginning in FY23, the maximum dollar value for the job training grants increased from 200K to 500K. So we're now dealing with larger grants, $500,000. So your fiscal houses need to be in order and the commitment is longer. The grant performance period increased from 3 years to 5 years. The transportation stipends, reasonable stipends to compensate trainees for participating in training, and reasonable childcare subsidies are eligible uses of grant funds. So this has been a recent change. And so again, as you look at your program, some of those challenges that you've had in these areas can now be helped through the grant with direct funding from the grant for those areas. Applicants that were selected to previous competitions are eligible to apply for additional funding by applying for a new grant. So again, if you have a current grant, it doesn't mean you have to wait it out. You can apply for a new grant and use that to add on to the program you have. But in some cases, existing or actually, in some cases, existing grantees may be maintaining 2 grants concurrently. So, you know, again, they're written as separate grants, they're issued as separate grants, but you're eligible to continue applying for grants even if you're currently running a grant. Due to funding restrictions associated with CERCLA and BIL, the following services must continue to be supported with leverage partnerships. So funding for life skills training, again, you have to leverage that. You can't fund it directly out of the grant. Funding for wraparound and support services, and there's restrictions on the type of environmental related training supported. So the agency does have stovepipes. So again, this is brownfield training, and they're very specific on what training they want to do. But some of the areas like wastewater and air tend to fall under different programs. So again, as you're designing your program and looking at your funding support, you have to make sure that you're within the guidelines of the specific grant. So there's links to the FY23 guidance material. Again, the best look at the future is to kind of look at the past. And I'll ask Steve if he could copy that whole section, links to FY23 guidance material, and put it in the chat, and it will be in the notes. But using available FY23 guidance materials would be a good strategy in preparing for your 24 application guidelines. It's not anticipated the evaluation criteria will change dramatically. So on June 15th in 2022, the EPA hosted an outreach webinar for prospective brownfield job training applicants. And requests for application guidelines can be found at a link. And again, I'll have Steve put that in the chat, and we'll put it in the notes. They're very long, so it doesn't make any sense for me to read them off to you. EPA has also prepared frequently asked questions and answers to assist prospective applicants with preparing brownfield job training grant applications. So that'll be a separate link, both in the chat and in the notes. And then finally, for general information about the FY23 BJT program grants, they have a homepage, and we'll put that link also. So again, there's 3 valuable links to, again, it's past information, but we feel that the same information will apply to the FY24 grants. So again, the best way to look to the future is to look at what they've done in the past. And again, we encourage all of you to look at your current programs. If you are wanting to apply, we encourage you to do that. If you already have a grant, but you want to take it further, we encourage you to do that also. So again, you know, it's one of those things that parts of it do take a longer time frame. So establishing your advisory boards, we'll talk to that, and doing your job analysis in your communities, you know, and looking at target populations, all those things take a little longer. So don't wait until the RFA comes out to start trying to put that together. And if you've been through this process before, down this road, you know that you can actually put in about 75% of your material, and the RFA, you know, just kind of tweak it in terms of what the actual length is or some of the specific questions they might ask you to answer. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Okay. Nolan brought up a very interesting point there. It's subtle, but I think we're going to need to get an answer on it. This is the issue of having multiple grants at the same time. When we look at the up until 22, FY22, these were 3-year grants for $200,000, as Nolan mentioned. When they got increased to $500,000, that was through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. That bill basically funds things up through about FY26. So that's indicating to me, and not this is all not nobody's said any of this, but it looks like EPA is going to be able to. They're going to be fairly flush with money through FY26. Hopefully that'll carry into the job training program. Now, what does this mean? People applying for the grants, we've got FY21 grantees who are almost do or must die programs if they want to keep federal funding. So these are people that are either running on fumes or in their last years of their grants, and they really need to apply for this FY24 grant to keep their program running with federal funds. They may go off with other funds, as some have done. Then we've got new grantees who are just applying for brand new funds. And I'll repeat this later, always apply, when in doubt, apply, and don't be discouraged, because EPA does level the playing field. It's very important for them to have new grantees in every cohort. So they are going to want to fund new grantees, and they realize that your grant proposal may not be as comprehensive. Your partnerships may not be as broad as someone who's been doing it for 10 or 15 years with established links. They take that under consideration. So we always encourage people to jump in with an application, and even if you're rejected, you will be on a list for the next year. And as I said, unless something changes in EPA, I see for the foreseeable future, the next near term, they're going to be doing another one in FY25. So you want to get into the loop. You want to get into it. Now, we have FY22 grantees who are, they're still in their program, but they could jump into an FY24 program, and they could operate 2 grants, okay? Similar to the people who got the grant this last year. These are people who are on 3-year grants. They could re-up for this 5-year grant, and then they operate both of these grants concurrently. They have to be somewhat different, and we'll get better guidance as we move forward. They're going to be evaluating the grants, but you could find that you may have a grant that's operating now, but you could expand operations within the scope of the funding, and you could be operating 2 grants at the same time. The first one would close out, and the second one would keep going. The third point is very subtle, but I think we need to get an answer. What if you got an FY23 grant for 5 years? What would keep you from getting an FY24 grant is the question I ask. In other words, say you started a program and you've got funding for FY23. That was last year. You've got 5 years of grant, but we know all how expenses increase, how we want to increase our programs, make them more comprehensive. Is there room to apply for an FY24 or an FY25 grant? Now, I don't know the answer to this. I expect we'll find out. They did say in last year's RFP, if you had a prior grant, you could apply for a new one. They didn't say anything about if you applied last year, you can't apply this year. So it'd be interesting for those of you who have grants that you just received to find an answer to that question. What happens in 24 or 25? And we'll find that out. Any questions on the opacity of EPA to give us this information or extending the grant longer? Okay, I'm gonna spend a little time, and I don't want to bore you, on what that grant RFA is going to look like. And for those of you who've been around, you're familiar with that. And then talk about things you should be doing now, no matter what type of grant you have. That RFA is basically consists of basically 3 basic areas. It's got a narrative portion. It's called a narrative, and then they have a narrative. They have a narrative sheets, which is a summary of the whole grant. They have a narrative, which we used to call the ranking criteria. This is the area of the grant that gives you an evaluation, and then they have attachments. And I'm just going to speak a little bit about this, so those of you who might be refresh your memory, or those of you who are new can see what to expect. The narrative sheets, you'll be able to do that towards the end of the grant after the RFA is issued. It's just basically administrative items and summary of what your grant's going to look like, your curriculum, your target area, this and your ability to be a nonprofit or a state or that you're eligible for the funds. This is what Nolan was referring to as the narrative. They take all the narrative sheets and it's only 3 pages max. And they'll say, okay, you can go on to the evaluation, and they'll let you know in 15 days if you don't qualify, if you're not a registered nonprofit, or if you're not, if you go over, or if for whatever reason, it's kind of a skimming surface. They knock out, if they get many grants, it's a way of filtering down to the ones that are really serious and want to go into evaluation, and that you'll know in 15 days. So that's relatively easy, and you don't need to worry about that until after you start writing the grant. I don't want to talk too much about the grantsmanship, because EPA is going to be doing a lot. Right after they make this announcement in June, they're going to schedule a Zoom call, be an hour and a half, and they're going to go over in detail what I'm going to talk about in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. They'll go into all the ranking criteria, and they'll also issue question and answer, and they'll be very similar to what you'll see in the notes from last year. So you could probably go through that and get a good feel for what they're going to be asking for. So that covers the narrative sheets, only 3 pages. Then you have the narrative. Now this is the big deal here. This is where they rank your proposal. They're graded on a curve. They're going to assign points to these major topics we're going to talk about, and they're going to be as subjective as they can, as objective as they can, I'm sorry, to rank these, who has the highest points in each of these sections. They'll add them all up, and they'll give you a point total, 94, 93, or 120. It depends on how many points they add. Recently, they've been adding more points to this. This is where there may be some changes in the proposal and how much weight to give to everything. And that narrative will be what we're going to be talking about in future BLCs in a way. The first thing is community need. And this is, of course, the biggie, your labor market assessment and your community assessment. And that community need demonstrates, is there a need for your program? Do you really need it? And we're going to, in future PLCs, we're going to be, how do you do a needs assessment? How do you do a community assessment to make sure that you're training in the right community? And if you've already got a program, the question is, are you continue to training in the right community, or do you maybe need to make a shift in your target communities? The other thing they're going to have on the evaluation criteria is training program description. This is your curriculum. We would think normally that this is an EPA job training program. This would be a big deal. It isn't as big as you would think. Of all the prep time it takes to run one of these programs, the curriculum is one of the not quite as important as some of the other ones. This is lining up your curriculum. And if you do your homework in your other areas, this will kind of fall into place. The third thing they're going to evaluate is on your budget to make sure all your costs are there. And in each of these sections, there are 7 sections in your evaluation. They're going to assign, as I said, point totals. Many of them will include charts. If you look at last year's RFA, they will give you a chart that you have to fill in and put the numbers in, and it'll give you a good idea of the type of data you have to collect. The fourth thing they're going to evaluate on is program structure. That's kind of not a real good name for that, but it's fairly important, and we're going to talk about it in the PLCs in the future. This is about your recruitment plan, your retention plan, your graduation dates, what you're going to do with your graduation, your recruitment and screening, your placement and tracking strategies, how you're going to sustain the program if federal funding ends. To us, this is a big deal when we talk about technical assistance, because we think that these are the most important part of running a good program is recruitment, placement, and making sure you retain your graduates. So we'll be talking about this in the PLCs. The fifth area of evaluation is partnerships. This is a big deal for EPA. What kind of partnerships have you developed and what kind of partnerships do you currently have. And they're going to be looking at a whole lot of how comprehensive is your program. Now, we all realize that they only have a limited amount of funding, and those are only for putting on EPA courses. So that means you have to have a lot of partners for wraparound services, other partnerships that you may need in placement, recruitment, retention. So that's going to be an important part of writing this grant. And again, I keep repeating myself. If you do the homework, and we're going to be talking about, you'll have done the background work for all of these, so that when the RFP comes out, you'll be able to write this proposal fairly easy. The sixth area is leveraging. How are you going to leverage funds? And this is an area they want to know that you're leveraging funds, and it's kind of approximate. There's a chart, and that chart could include in-kind leveraging, what kind of money or in-kind resources you're getting from outside this grant. It's more of an informational part of the grant that they ask you to write. And the seventh is your capability. Have you had experience? If you have no experience and you're just starting out, how are you partnering with people who will have experience? Are you going to contract? Are you using consultants? How are you going to do that? How are you going to evaluate those contractors? And then, of course, the final part of this, those are the 7 evaluation criteria that they're going to use to give you a point total. Try to get as many points as possible on those. And then that'll be backed up by your attachments. And attachments is kind of it's a little throw-all bin. This is where you're going to put your support letters, other factors, if you've got special things going on in your community, your partnership, your letters, your milestones, everything that doesn't fit into the narrative goes into that. Lengthwise, we said that the narrative sheets, that first part is only 3 pages, and you could wait on that till you're doing the grant writing. The narrative is a big thing that we're going to be working on in PLCs, of how to do the best assessment, recruitment, partnership development, curriculum development. That's going to be 12 pages. And I'm leaving the grantsmanship up to EPA. They will, in their discussions with you, they're going to be talking about how to write this grant. The attachment section, which is the last section, is 15 pages, and that's going to have your support letters. Those support letters, they want not from the governor, or unless the governor is giving you partnership support, they're not looking for famous people. They're looking for people who have promised to do something. They're promising to provide lunches for your grantees, or they're promising to provide financial literacy services, and they're committing. And we're going to talk about that in the future, of how you get those commitment letters, and how you develop your partnerships from, are you interested in the program? Oh yeah, you're interested. Do you want to get involved? Yeah, you want to get involved. Would you be willing to provide a letter of support for our grant? And we're going to, later on, we'll be talking about how to evolve, how to get into that, so that when the grant is written, you're going to have all the information you need. And I think this is kind of what I'm trying to get at with the PLC. What we want to focus on is doing the background work and getting things that you'll be able to use, so that when that last 60 days comes, you'll have all the data collected. It's like having a bunch of index cards or topic points, and then to actually write the grant in that last 60 days. It'll give you plenty of time in 60 days to write it. And as you've probably already seen, to do all this work in 60 days is going to be impossible, or very difficult. So you want to start collecting these things now, so that when you write the grant, you'll be ready. Now, new grantees are going to, this is a question that is always asked. I'm not sure if I'm going to get the grant. Why should I do all of this work or line these people up if I don't get the grant? And this is the difference between this grant and traditional federal grants. traditional federal grants, you write a proposal, they give you the money, and then you line up everything. EPA has taken a different route. We want you to have all your ducks in order before we give you the money. So you've got to have your program pretty well scoped out before they give you the money. So how do you do this? And the way you do this is that you approach your partners by saying, we are interested in getting EPA money. We feel over the next 3 or 4 years, there's going to be a very good possibility that we could get federal money, at least $500,000, to develop a job training program and environment in our community. Would you be willing to help us? Now, I can't guarantee you that this is going to go through, but we need to develop our program to write a strong support. We will keep you informed all along the path. And if you will go along with us, once the program is going, we would like to count on you to help us out. And 9 out of 10 will say absolutely, because, and the way they'll say that is the partners you're going to be recruiting, part of their mandate is to help other people. So in other words, if part of the mandate of HHS is to provide childcare or provide perhaps fit tests or help programs, they want to use your program to say, we are working with the HMTRI EPA program to provide these services because they don't provide them. And so it's a win-win. So for new grantees, don't feel anxious about trying to line up partners too early. You want to get them lined up as early as possible. And with that, I'm going to segue into what should you be doing now? And anyone have any questions over this? There's going to be a lot to say about the RFA when it comes out. And so I don't want to dwell too much on the nuts and bolts of that. That's basically a grant writer's issue. And we'll be talking about, as we get closer, we're going to be talking about do's and don'ts of grant writing, what you should put in your proposal, what you should stay away from, things you make sure you omit, and we'll actually give you a checklist as we get closer. But for those of you who have grants, I don't want to bore you with that. At this point, we want to tell you, how do you do this prep so that when the 60 days comes, you'll be able to write this grant fairly easy. So does anyone have any questions or actually contributions on setting one of these programs up? Okay, some of you have done this for a long time, and people like Abby they're pros at this. They've got their ducks lined up and they've got their partnerships, but it doesn't mean that they're not always looking for new partners. And and their old partners may fall out. And so we have found where trainers will come and go from programs. And so you constantly have to be on the lookout for new partners and new relationships. The same with retention, new ways of retaining your students or new ways of placing your students. So I'd like to talk a little bit, and we'll wind this up today, about things you should be doing now. And for anyone contemplating applying for this grant or waiting to see if they should apply for this grant, there are some things you need to have in place. And I think those of you who are experienced have already done this to some extent. You're really at the point now where you're doing research and feasibility. Do we want to move forward? You've got to assemble your team. And some of you may be the one that will be the team. Some of you may just have an idea, we want to bring this to our community, but I don't know where we're going with this. So what you've got to do is start getting the feel for your community and see who may be interested in doing something like this. This might surprise you. Some of you who may have grantees, you may have grants, but you may go out the field that you're missing some partners who would really like to get into this, and you just pass them over the first time around because you were fairly well focused in getting this grant. There may be people out there that may be as good or even a better fit for what you're doing. But you've got to get the lay of the land. For example, we were talking to Colorado not long ago on a call, and they were saying, well, it looks like we may get this other grant. And that grant is a job training grant, nothing to do with environmental, but it's a Department of Labor grant. And we could leverage that grant, and we could attach onto it an environmental grant. Or there may be some other grant that's in your, it might be a HUD grant with asbestos removal, or a HUD grant working on housing. And you might say, well, there may be a fit for us, and let's start researching out if there is interest. And if there is, okay, we go to the next step. And that next step is we have to start saying, okay, if we're going to apply for this grant, what are we going to need? Well, obviously we're going to need the project officer, or you, or someone who is going to be the coordinator of this whole thing. But there are going to be some technical people we're going to need. We're going to need someone to write the grant, for grant writer. We're going to need someone familiar with accounting to work with our budgets. We're going to need someone who has worked with grants.gov. Now, these are important issues. Grants.gov, as Nolan and Steve has alluded to, this can only be submitted, this is submitted through grants.gov. And as we said earlier, and we'll be saying in the future, you have to be registered with grants.gov. If you're familiar with writing one of these grants, it's a slam dunk. If you're not, it's a real challenge, and you need to go through, as Steve had mentioned, you have to register, you have to get the authorization, the person authorized. So that you have to start like right now. If you have no one in mind to write this grant, to submit this grant for you, you really need to start thinking, when I'm looking at someone to work with, maybe I should find someone first who has submitted grants to the federal government. And that may be through grants.gov. Now, very often it might be the county, the city, or even the state. So we have many, or it may be a WIB. You may have a WIB that's a Workforce Investment Board that would say, oh, okay, we'll go on, we'll submit this for you. You get the project going and keep us informed, let us know how this is going to work out. And so they'll be a key partner. And it could be that they'll be the fiscal agent and you'll be doing all the work. And this happens very often where, for example, the city of Durham was the project, they were officially the submitter, fiscal agent, but they use Durham, the community college, to do all the work. So they just handed it off. This is a very common instance because this is a problem that EPA has, is that they have a lot of money for a lot of programs, but when they look at community organizations, they're starting from scratch and they don't have the resources. They have not submitted grants to grants.gov. They have not done, they don't have a bank of accountants or grant writers. So these are people you want to line up now or start thinking about when you're going to be writing this grant. How do you get to the field goal? How do you get to that finish line from here? And you want to start now to line that up as a feasibility study, basically. Then you want to start looking, of course, once you've got that lined up, then you start looking at your team members. And we'll be talking about those in the future. Someone who is good at recruitment. You're going to need a techie, someone who knows the technical aspects of training, whether you're going to contract that all out. And if you're kind of contracted out, is it someone you could count on and is going to be able to train your target group? Or what are you going to do provide the technical courses? You need this contact for your wraparound services. What else are you going to do besides technical training if you're going to do anything? You certainly need someone for partner development who's going to keep on target to all your partners. And that may be you as project officer, depending on how involved you're going to be. And you're going to need someone that's really good at community outreach, because as we're going to say in the next PLC, you've got to do this community and labor market assessment, and you need to get into the community somehow. So this is a problem we've had with some academic institutions. They're so academic, they don't want to leave campus. And they look at the community as them, not us. And this is a program where they are us, we are them, and we're going to be working in the community. We may be training in the community. So we have to have community involvement. So it's always good to have someone on your team that's a community type person. And then it's always good to have someone who is a government type person, who is familiar with, they know their way around City Hall. Someone like Paul, who works with the mayor. We've seen this in many cases where they work in the mayor's office and they're working on this program. And it's very synergistic. And the beautiful thing about this is that they have inside information. They know what's going on. They know what programs are going on in City Hall. They know who they're contracting out for cleanup services. So it gives you an in. So you certainly want this person on the team. So at this point in the time, early, we're not at a critical phase at all. You want to be doing your groundwork. And for those of you who already have grants, you want to kind of look over your program and just kind of do a scan of all these areas. Do we have someone that's paying attention to all these things? Do we have someone that's working with employers? Do we have someone that's in government? Should we be more involved in government outreach? Do we have sufficient partner development? Or perhaps we could be doing more in terms of leveraged services, whether it's lunches or childcare or transportation. Are we offering all the wraparound services we could be, or are there a lot of them that we could be offering? So these are the things that we should be doing. But right now, for those of you who are anticipating a grant or getting your team together, is you've got to do this feasibility study and see if you're ready to go to the next step. And the last word of caution I would say is, as I've said before, apply no matter what. Even if you start to go through this process and you think, I can't write a decent proposal, write the proposal anyway and submit it. And you may have a feasible proposal, not enough partners, or you may not have your ducks in line. But keep in the back of your mind that next year, in fact, this grant will be evaluated in August, and it won't actually, the announcements won't be out till February, and it'll be time to start this all over again. So if you haven't started now, you're going to be in the same predicament as you are now next year. So my advice is jump into it and go for it, and go through the motions. And you may be surprised, because the vibrations I'm getting from EPA is they have a lot of money. They're concerned about they're short of people, even within EPA. EPA, I was on an environmental justice call the other day. EPA is recruiting people for headquarters right now. They're very concerned about the capability of local organizations to do these grants. So it's a great time to be a community organization and be involved. So I would say get into it and see what's going on, because there may be other grants that will come to you as a result of applying for this grant. So does anyone have any questions about this whole grant process of, it could seem daunting right now if you're new to it, but if you take step by step, it becomes easier, I think. Doesn't it? Mac, you've been through this. Is this still daunting to you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because we applied the last round and we didn't get it, but our grant officer was really, really great on best practices and areas of their concern when we applied. So we went through the whole grant, and she was really wonderful. The areas where we scored low and where we scored high. So one of the things that we did was we have partners that actually do our trainings. So so the letters of support from the employers actually have to come to us, not our employer. So we had to rearrange, talk to the employers, inform them of what we're doing, because we provide many of the services, not just we just don't do the occupational type of work. So we contract that out. So we had to revise, those letters, have them sign it. So we're ready for the next round. So that's what we've been doing. So again,
Great. Could I ask you,
Yeah,
how did you do that letters of support? Did you write a letter and then have them
Yeah.
sign it, or did
We
you have
wrote-
them originate it?
we wrote a letter of support of what areas that we'll be doing and what areas of the employer. So basically, they cannot promise you they're going to hire, but we had, and in the letter of support, they basically said that we're going to give you some areas where we want our employee to have, what type of training, what type of credential, and we will promise that we would actually interview but not hire. So that was one of the areas that we did. So we gave them a template. Again, they took it, they reworded it however they wanted, and then they submitted it back with their signature.
The best training on this really comes after, as Max said, we've had many grantees who have bombed out on the first one.
Yep.
But this is an annual competition. So before you know it, it's time for the second one. And the technical assistance he got from EPA. Now, once the RFA comes out, the EPA can't talk to you anymore. But after you've been rejected, they could now help you and guide you along and actually give you contacts, which is fantastic. You're in a great region, and Linda is super on that, and they'll help you to no end, because regional coordinators take pride in having grantees in their region. So it's not us against them. They really want to help you. So, great. Any other questions? Nolan, did you want to suggest something that?
I was just gonna, you reinforced the point, but I wanted to reinforce what Mac had said, that the review process, when you're rejected, they do a kind of a SWOT analysis, and so they can really give you valuable insight and information as to where your proposal might have fallen short or may have been a little bit weak, or very weak. But the point is that it helps you to understand why you not only didn't get accepted that round, but also what you need to do in order to make your proposal much more competitive. And so we found that's really important feedback. So to go back to what you said earlier, even if you don't think you have all your ducks in a row and you don't think you're writing the world's best proposal, go ahead and write it and submit it anyway, because at least you'll get that analysis if it's not accepted, and then that'll just help you develop it for the next time.
Well, we have to keep in mind too, this is graded on the curve. So there are two things that happen when government puts out a grant. One is they want more people to apply, and they don't get enough people to apply, and they're grading on a curve. Or if the grant's too large, they get tons of grants applications and people just hunting for money, and they have to figure out how to filter them out. This program seems to be somewhere in between. They do get nefarious applications, but they screen them out fairly early. And I think they could tell which are the serious ones. And then now they have a pool of, well, this is our pool of real contenders. And the fact that we're going 5-year, $500,000 grants, in my mind, it might be more of a challenge for them to find local organizations who want to apply for this money, because this is a difficult grant to write. So I think this is a great time to apply, because, as I said, they're flush with money, and they're going to be grading on the curve. So I think those things are all working in your favor.
Right. Yes, and by submittal, there's a relationship development. So as Mac mentioned, your relationship with that regional job coordinator is very important, because then they understand that, yes, you are applying for this, and you can have other conversations with them that, again, might help with that next proposal. So.
Well, one of the things I didn't mention on things to do now, and go to the notes, and all of the regional coordinators are in every session of the notes. Write an email to your regional coordinator and tell them that you're interested in applying for the FY24 RFA. You've been going to the PLCs and you'd like to be put on any list that they have, any information they could help you with. And you may very well get a phone call from them. Oh yeah, we want to help you. You would be amazed. A lot of them will have regional coordinator meetings of just trying to, they're looking for people in their region who are interested in starting one of these programs. Right now, EPA is in the mode of, let's try to get people interested in applying for this grant. So they're right now trying to recruit applicants for the grant. So you do want to at least send an email to the regional coordinator and indicate to them, yes, we're considering applying for the grant, and any way you can help us, let us know, and you'll get you'll start the beginning of a reply and probably be put on their listserv.
And as Mike mentioned, this is also a good time to start that early planning on where your support will come for those wraparound services and other services that are outside the grant that are so essential to your program. So this grant in and of itself will not make a successful program for the people you are serving. So they need other services that you will need to have arrangements and agreements with other agencies in order to provide those. So this is a good time to start that sort of longer path of who that might be and what kind of relationship you might have with them.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Rachel, congratulations on your first cohort. I hope it's the beginning of many for you.
I hope so too. We have a lot of information to give out, and a lot of people want to get in on all the fun. So we're excited to be able to start progressing and hopefully get more money too.
There we go. There we go.
There you go.
Apply,
The
apply,
M-word.
Mhm.
apply.
Yeah.
They
And so
are the
speaking-
bag lady, and they have plenty of money in that bag. So I would say let's go for it. And I as I said, I really want to get an answer to this. What happens if you got an FY23 grant for 5 years? Can you apply for an FY24 grant for 5 years and run two grants at the same time? I don't know that they've even thought about that yet, but we'll find out.
And again, reemphasize what Steve said, make those hotel reservations early and often, because again, we can only support people who are staying in that room block, and that will fill up and that will close out before you know it. So again, we hope to see you. We will see you at the all grantee meeting, but again, make those hotel reservations and get your friends and family to register and come to the event. So.
Thanks all for attending, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Steve, you could
Thank
stop
you.
recording now.
Okay, let's see.